Any case of mass murder is shocking to all those involved, but it's especially so when 4 young students are all murdered in their beds in cold blood. That's what happened in a student home in Moscow, Idaho. Someone broke in, stabbed them, and left. In today's video, we're going to take a closer look at this case and see what we know so far and what remains unclear. While there is a suspect awaiting trial, and this seems to be close to a resolution, there are plenty of unanswered questions about the night in question, the lack of any clear motive, and the other disregarded tip-offs. We need to establish what we do know before we can consider everything that we don't know. These are the basics. On November 13th, 2022, 4 students were killed in their off-campus home. 3 were roommates: Kaylee Gonclaves, 21, Madison Mogen, 21, and Zana Kernodle, 20. The 4th was Kernodle's boyfriend, Ethan Chapin. There were 2 other students in the home that survived, called for help the next morning, and later helped with the inquiries. There were no direct witnesses, and 1 man now faces trial. There is no doubt that this is a tragic incident for those that died, their families, and those that survived the ordeal. On paper, this could have been a horrific act of random violence or a targeted attack based on a grudge. However, as with all the cases on our channel, there are some curious twists and turns that make this more intriguing. By the way, if you happen to be new here, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to help us out. Your support means we can keep creating content like this and getting to the heart of some shocking cases. For a long time, the police struggled to find a likely culprit and conducted many searches and interviews. Eventually, they arrested Brian Christopher Kohberger, age 28, that December. Kohberger was a PhD criminology student at Washington State University at the time of his arrest. This is not far from Moscow, Idaho, and any links to criminology always raise eyebrows. He also worked as a teaching assistant there, which says something about his character. However, there are no clear connections between him and the victims beyond this proximity to the crime scene. There is some evidence presented by the prosecution that suggests he went past the students' home a lot, but no clue as to why. He may have met them in a social or academic capacity, but his age suggests they would not have made a close connection. There is, however, the issue of the alleged stalker, which we'll come back to later. We wouldn't be here talking about this today if this was a simple case with a cut-and-dry solution. This is a case where it feels like there are a few puzzle pieces that got lost along the way. Right now we have 4 victims, 2 lucky survivors, and a man facing trial for fitting a profile and some suspicious behavior. However, the defense is already questioning the legitimacy of the evidence. There's a gap in the timeline, and questions about other suspects have faded away. Let's go over each of these issues for a moment. This is where Kohberger's defense team is ready to fight against the prosecution. There are lots of aspects to the scene and his arrest that aren't strong enough in their eyes. These include the connection to his phone, the overall description of the suspect, and the footwear. They aren't happy with the vague nature of the description of the suspect leaving the home. It talks about an athletic but not muscular build and bushy eyebrows. There was nothing that noteworthy, and many men in the area would have fit it to a degree. This issue continues along with the clothing and footwear. A big part of the arrest lies with a blood-stained Vans-type footprint left by the suspected killer. There are no apparent details about the size. In a college town like Moscow, Idaho, there were sure to have been countless guys with Van-like shoes. As for the dark clothing seized by the team, this could have been inconsequential. The case against Kohberger strengthens a little with reports that not only was his DNA at the scene, but his car circled the home and his phone had pinged in the area. The defense argues that this doesn't put him there at the time of the murder, and he lived close enough for this sort of mobile ping and for someone to see his car nearby. Let's step away from the suspect for a moment and go back to the crime scene and the 2 survivors. There's an odd gap in the events that took place between the killings and the police report. All 4 victims returned home late that night from 2 separate nights out. Chapin and Kernodle attended a party at a fraternity house on the campus of the University of Idaho. They returned home around 1:45 a.m. on Sunday, November 13th. Mogen and Gonclave spent their night drinking at a bar called the Corner Pub in the downtown area of Moscow that night, before heading to a food truck. This was then substantiated by CCTV footage. Both pairs returned to the house at around 1:45 a.m. At 4 a.m., one survivor heard crying, opened her door, and saw a man leaving. This is where we get that description attributed to Kohberger. They returned to the room in shock and locked the door. The police report says that the 4 students were likely stabbed between 3 and 4 a.m., which is consistent with the sighting of the suspect leaving the home. Then there's a gap. The report states that the roommates called friends after one of the victims seemed to be unresponsive. Apparently, they thought they had passed out and didn't suspect any other foul play at that point. It wasn't until 11:58 a.m. that the emergency services received a 911 call to help them. We aren't saying that the 2 survivors had anything to do with the deaths. There is probably a good reason why no one realized what had happened, and why the 4 students lay dead for so long. But if there was an intruder in the home, and the sound of crying, why did it take so long to call for help? This is where the case takes an interesting turn. For a while, there was the notion that this was a targeted attack, although the police backpedaled on their phrasing. It wasn't clear if they thought 1 or more students were directly targeted by the killer. This ties in with another aspect of the case and the reports of stalkers. While the police gathered information about the crime, they ended up with a surprising amount of tip-offs about potential suspects. Some reports were questionable, and one college professor took legal action after an accusation by a student. Some questioned the ex-boyfriend that called on the night. Then there are all the reports of stalkers. While asking the general public for information, the police received around 16,500 tips talking about their whereabouts, potential suspects, and other factors. This included hundreds relating to a potential stalker targeting Kaylee Gonclaves. Now, the police investigated this considerably at the time, with the cops following up on several leads. It may be why they originally saw this as a targeted crime. There were no clear suspects identified as stalkers, and the idea was never verified. We could dismiss this as town gossip and a case of broken telephone with misinformation across campus. Still, that's a lot of reports. Also, there was an incident where 2 men seemingly followed Gonclaves into a local store and then to her car. This was later dismissed. Of course, there is the possibility that Kohberger is linked to this stalker situation, but that doesn't seem likely. There are issues with the prosecution's case and the evidence presented. However, there are also issues with the defense. Kohberger was in the area. He was potentially scouting the place out, and he does fit the description, however vague and generic that may have been. Without a clearer case for his defense, and with such strong public feelings about the deaths, it seems he will face the death penalty. He also doesn't have a clear alibi as far as we can tell. On the other hand, what was his motive? If that was him driving past the house and checking it out, why do it? Why stab all those people on the upper floors and not the 2 that survived? The more we think about this one, the more questions we have. You probably feel the same way. Do you reckon that Brian Kohberger was to blame for these murders, and that the description and shoe print will be enough to sentence him? Or do you think there is more to this stalker situation, and that this is a mistaken identity? Leave us a comment below with your views, and don't forget to share this so that other true crime fans can have their say. Sooner or later, we will have a final verdict from the justice system, and Kohberger may even face death for this quadruple homicide. But unless someone finally confesses all, we may never know why he or another culprit entered the house that night.